The Federal Trade Commission has set a date for the first leg of its lootbox investigation, a public workshop that looks to host a discussion between industry representatives, consumer advocates, trade associations, academics, and government officials on the monetization practice. That event will be held on August 7th at the Constitution Center in Washington, D.C., and also streamed online. The workshop aims to cover a bit more than just a blanket discussion on loot boxes. However, the FTC notes that it wants to cover topics like the origins, evolutions, and role of loot boxes in the digital marketplace. Research that examines consumer behavior in the context of video games and digital transactions, and consumer awareness and education about the mechanics, marketing, and financial commitments associated with loot boxes. In the lead-up to the workshop, the FTC is still looking to solicit input from members of the public on potential workshop topics and participants through June 7th. The FTC is only the latest government body to have a closer look at how loot boxes are used in video games, though the Commission's first step is already milder than some taken by other regulators outside of the United States that range from fining companies for deceptive loot box practices to outright finding loot boxes unlawful. This has led to game companies altering how loot boxes and other in-game star elements function in those regions, such as these changes to FIFA's in-game currency in Belgium. Valve's multiple changes should Dota2 and CS:GO in the Netherlands. Edit gave more nuanced advice on ADPCM, added some details that were missing, rephrased some unclear wording, and fixed a mistake in the Venn diagram that erroneously listed Uncompressed on disk as being a low-RAM option. Unity's audio import settings are not widely understood in their entirety, and at the time of writing, I have been unable to find any comprehensive guides to their use. Unity's documentation does a pretty good job of describing what its audio import settings do, but I would like to break these descriptions down for a wider audience and give some more detail on how to use these settings to get better performance out of your game. This document is divided into 5 parts: how audio can affect performance, understanding import settings, my recommended settings for PC and console, my recommended settings for mobile, warnings and notes. Optimizing your Unity audio import settings is one of the easiest wins for optimization, and depending on the scale of your project, should take you less than an hour to achieve significant improvements in load times, RAM use, and other areas. I hope this guide will be of use to you. Info is current as of Unity version 2018. Audio data is big. For many games, sound data can take the lion's share of disk space, the drive cartridge, optical disc, etc. that the game data is stored on, and run the working memory of the system. As if this were not bad enough, it can also take a strain on the CPU, especially if you are using DAP, runtime audio processing effects, and significantly increase load times. For 3 of these areas: disk space, RAM use, CPU use, optimization is a triangular together, like the good cheap quick problem. Depending on which area is causing your game the most trouble, you can save efficiency in one area by sacrificing it in another. For example, if your audio is taking up too much RAM, you can start Decompressed as Vorbis instead. This saves RAM space at the cost of the CPU, since it takes processing power to decode the compressed file when it is accessed. Below is a diagram of different settings and how they affect these 3 areas. Please note This diagram tells us nothing about the bandwidth of data being accessed from the diagram. In reality, it's a little more nuanced than that. But this should give you a general idea of how these issues are interconnected. To understand how to implement these settings and tackle problems like extended load times, we need to look at each of the audio import settings in detail. When you select an audio clip in the Unity editor, you are greeted by this panel in the inspector window. Below is a list of the audio settings from top to bottom. And what they do? Yes, if audio clip is in stereo, are another number of channels. Down mix is all channels down into mono. No, does not modify channel count. As an audio designer, I never force to mono, because I create sounds for purpose. But if you are using stock assets and want to enable this setting, be careful to check that the mono sound file does not sound thin and weird because of phase interactions between the left and right channels. You can preview the processed sound by pressing the play button on the bottom right of the inspector window. If you are getting phasing issues, you may want to put the sound apart in an audio editor and export just the left or right channel as a mono sound. Yes, readjusts the gain of the audio clip so that the now mono sound is the same volume as the original stereo file. No, does not readjust the gain. It is usually advisable to enable normalization if you are using files to mono. A loud stereo file, when some to mono, can be even louder, going above maximum amplitude and causing hard digital clipping, which is usually undesirable. These settings have direct effects on each other, so I am presenting them together. Load in background. Preload audio data. Outcome. Enabled. When the scene is loaded, audio clips with this setting begin loading, but do not store the main thread. If they have not all finished loading by the time the scene has loaded, they will continue to load in the background as the scene plays. If a sound that has not loaded yet is triggered, it will behave the same as if it had preload disabled, immediately below. Enabled. Disabled. When the sound is triggered for the first time, it will load in the background and play as soon as it is ready. If the file is large, this will cause a noticeable delay between triggering and playing. But this is not an issue for subsequent plays of the sound. Disabled. Enabled. The audio is loaded while the scene is loaded. The scene will not start until all sounds with this setting are loaded into memory. Disabled. When the sound is triggered for the first time, it uses the main thread to load itself into memory. If the file is large, this will cause a frame hitch, but this is not an issue for subsequent plays of the sound. I would only recommend this for very small files, and even then, make sure to measure the impact this has on performance in the profiler, and consider whether a large number of these sounds might possibly be triggered at once, multiplying the hit to performance. Check this box if the clip has Ambisonic encoded audio. Ambisonic audio is useful for VR, AR, and 360 video etc., but is not really domain to this guide. These tags let you specify a default setting and platform-specific settings for the settings below. Some platforms have compression formats that are not available on other platforms, and some might just have different hardware that requires you to optimize differently. See notes below for more on platform-specific compression formats. Make sure to track the platform-specific settings. Even if you want everything to use the general settings, Unity may set some platform-specific settings for you automatically. For example, EOS builds may default to specify sample rate 22 kHz, which can cause aliasing, a sound glitch introduced by downsampling incorrectly. Decompress unload Audio is stored on disk in the compression format specified, but is decompressed and loaded raw into aren as ADPCM. This takes up a lot of RAM and increases load time a bit, but is very cheap in terms of CPU and very fast to access. Compressed in memory, audio is stored both on disk and in RAM in the compression format specified. This takes less RAM and less load time, but costs CPU when the sound is played, as it needs to be decompressed on the fly each time it is played. Streaming audio is streamed directly off the disk, without going into RAM at all. This uses some disk throughput and CPU, but on PC console, it does not have a huge impact on performance, so long as there are no more than 2 sounds streaming simultaneously. On mobile, particularly lower-end and old devices, streaming more than one stereo audio file simultaneously starts taking a heavy toll on CPU use. See warnings below. PCM, straight up audio data, fully uncompressed, and it takes up loads of disk space and RAM, but playing it is basically free, because it does not need to be decompressed. ADPCM, very old compression format with a compression ratio of 3